Hi, you're listening to Book Chat with author Vivian E. Moore.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome to Book Chat. I am your host, author Vivian E. Moore. Hope everyone had a great week, and I hope that you're having an even better weekend. All right, so we're going to get straight to today's show. The title of today's show is Surprise, Surprise. And the topic is how to introduce new characters without confusing readers. Okay, so I believe that one of the major challenges writers face is introducing new characters, right? Especially into a story without making them feel like they just basically appeared out of nowhere, all right? So, if a character suddenly pops up midway or worse at the end, your readers might feel just a little bit blindsided, okay? So, just questioning where this person came from and why they even matter. So how do you introduce new characters in a way that feels natural, right? Seamless, and the most important thing, avoids that confusion, all right? So the key principle, I think, to remember is the word foreshadowing, okay? Predicting, first mention principle, things of that nature. Okay, so just let me tell you about foreshadowing. And basically what that is it's like planting the seeds early. Okay, it's like I said, the first mention principle. So generally the names or the places that are mentioned at the beginning of the story, those are generally the things that will continue into the story. So that way, when you mention someone or you mention a place, it's not a surprise because you did mention it. You set it up, okay? So that way you could bring it in later. But anyway, the best way to keep readers from basically scratching their heads at a last minute character is, again, to hint at their existence before they officially appear. Do it subtly, okay? All right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to give them a full-blown introduction pages ahead, but what you need to do is drop those breadcrumbs that can make their arrival feel intentional, okay? So we're going to talk about ways to foreshadow a new character, all right? So I think the first thing that comes to mind is just to mention them in passing. Okay, so you can have another character just in the story casually reference them in conversation. Okay, so if you're an avid reader, you've read a ton of books probably where the main character didn't necessarily mention this character that's going to come along later. But one of the other characters in this story did it for them. Okay, so this is just an example. So instead of suddenly introducing, we'll talk about thrillers because thrillers is my thing right now. I love thrillers. Okay, so say we're and crime thrillers. Let me just throw that out there. So say you use a detective who solves a case in the final act. So you might have a character earlier in the story say, well, if anyone can crack this case, it's Detective so-and-so. Okay, so that way, when Detective so-and-so finally arrives, those readers, they already know who they are, right? So that's just one way to do it, just to mention them in passing. All right. And then the second thing is you can use those environmental clues. All right. So if your story involves a character who at some point in the story will become important later, you need to try leaving hints about them in the setting. Okay. Maybe a character keeps finding mysterious notes or seeing the same unfamiliar name on documents, or just overhearing a rumor about someone. That is one of those environmental clues that you can use to do that foreshadowing. Okay. So the third thing is to have them act from the shadows before you officially meet them. Your new character, they might indirectly influence the story. So that's important, especially if you've never mentioned them before and they have a direct impact on the story. You want to make sure that you do that. And maybe you can do that by just, pulling a few strings behind the event, that way you can make their presence felt but not fully explained until later. So what it will help to do is to build that intrigue and to keep your readers engaged, because that's what you want to do. That's what you need to do. Okay. So the fourth thing is you need to tie them to an existing character. Okay. Because readers feel less jarred when a new character connects to someone that they already know. Right. So, they might just be a long lost sibling, or a former mentor, or an old rival, or, if another character reacts as though this person has always been part of their world. So what that does is it reassures the readers that they weren't just thrown in randomly. Let me tell you, folks, that does not work. Okay, just don't, out of just thin air, create a new character in the storyline. That doesn't work. Okay, that is not going to go over well, because again, readers are very savvy. They're paying attention, especially if they are very engrossed in the story from the beginning. They're paying attention to every single detail of that story to make sure that it flows all the way through. So don't think that you're going to try to trick them, or that you're being creatively crafty by introducing a new character that just came from nowhere into the story. That does not work. So don't do that. Okay. From a writer's perspective, you may think that, oh, wow, I'm savvy too. So I'm going to sneak this character in and, and see if they get it. Of course they're going to get it, but they're not going to like it, because that wasn't part of the original storyline. So why are you switching it up midway through, or at some point in the story? That's not a good idea. Don't do that. Okay. The next thing is the danger of those surprise characters, right? So we know that a surprise character introduction without a proper setup, it will feel forced, okay? And it's also so frustrating. So my daughter and I, we had a conversation earlier this week. So this is how this episode came about, right? So we were talking about, she was telling me about this book because she belongs to a book club, right? And so she was telling me about this book that she was reading, and she stopped reading it because, she was halfway through with it, or almost at the end, when they introduced a new character. So we were talking about it. And she was like, it just didn't make sense. I was like, well, no, I don't guess that would make sense, especially if the book wasn't a sequel or something like that. Now, I've read books that were sequels where they would introduce a new character at the end of the book, but then that character would continue on to the next book, right? So that makes sense if you're doing it in that perspective. to introduce that character at the end, because they will be the next storyline in the next book. Okay. It could be a standalone book, or it may be the sequel to the first book. But in cases like that, you probably can get away with that. But not if this is the one and only book, and then you bring in a surprise character at the end that serves absolutely no purpose at all for the story, because they were not mentioned anywhere in that storyline. And so, it messes up the whole book. I mean, the book may have been good until it got to that point, and then it's like, what did you just do? You just ruined it for me, because you just messed the whole thing up by introducing a new character that you never even mentioned before, and then the story is ending. So how much sense does that make? Zero sense, right? So we don't want to do that to our readers. We don't want to introduce those surprise characters because it will leave you feeling like, you got sucker punched. And that's not fair, because, we have to respect our readers, especially their intelligence, but, more importantly, their time, because, they've spent their dollars to buy this book that supports you, the author, by the way. And, and you're not helping yourself as an author if you are one of those writers who write storylines like this, because I can almost promise that the reviews are going to be horrible. So don't do that to yourself, and don't do it to the readers, because they deserve more than that. They deserve better than that. Okay. So, don't do that. Don't be tricky, because it's not good. All right. And, I've also read books to where, it was a murder mystery. And then in the final chapter, the detective suddenly reveals the killer. But guess what? The killer was never, ever mentioned. Okay. So again, it feels like a cheap trick rather than a well-crafted twist. Okay. You're not being cute doing that. Okay. You're just messing up the story. Don't do that. Okay. I write books, but I also read them. All right. And the same impression that's left on me with storylines that throw in surprise characters, it's the same impression that's left with the readers that we're writing for. We don't want to do that to them, because it's not right. So, I think instead of doing that, what you need to do is to give your readers the best story possible, okay, with just enough clues so, that when the characters arrive, it feels like a revelation rather than an out of the blue surprise. We don't want to do that to them. Okay. We don't ever want to do that, because it's not fair. It's not crafty. And again, you're not being cute. Okay. So, what we need to do is be more intentional with our writing. All right. That is one of the most important things we can do. To ensure that everyone will be happy in the end, because that is so important. To get to make sure that those details are working like they're supposed to. So, new characters should feel like they belong in the world that you've built, right? By, again, that foreshadowing, their presence, weaving them into the story's fabric, and then ensuring that they have a meaningful connection to what's already happening. So you need to make this introduction seamless and satisfying. So the next time you're about to introduce a new character, you need to ask yourself, have I laid the groundwork for this person to appear? And if your answer is yes, congratulations, okay? You've mastered the art of the non-surprising surprise. All right, guys, that is the show for today. I hope that that it helps a bit. And as I always say before I leave you, make sure that you listen, like, and share, and also tell those who you care about the most how you feel about them today, because tomorrow is not promised. And on that note, I love you. I hope you love me back. Until the next time you hear my voice, God bless you and goodbye.
Loved what you've heard on this week's episode? Well, the answer is simple. It would mean the world to us if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and feedback. Spreading the word really is the best way to grow our podcast and achieve even greater things. Thank you.